Edmund Kemper was just 15 years old when his life crossed a line it could never come back from. At that time, Edmund wasn't living with his mother. Their relationship had been so toxic, so cruel, that he was sent to live with his grandparents on a remote ranch in California. On the surface, it looked peaceful, open land, quiet days, routine. But inside Edmund's head, things were anything but calm. From a young age, Edmund believed his mother hated him. She constantly belittled him, mocked him, and made him feel unwanted. He internalized that hatred and carried it everywhere. Even away from her, the resentment followed him. One day in 1964, Edmund was sitting in the kitchen with his grandmother. What started as a normal conversation turned into an argument. And as it escalated, something shifted in Edmund's mind. He later said that in that moment, he no longer saw his grandmother as herself. He saw his mother. Someone trying to control him. Someone talking down to him. Someone he resented deeply. Edmund walked away from the kitchen, retrieved a rifle, and returned. He shot his grandmother multiple times. When she fell, he stabbed her to make sure she was dead. But the violence didn't stop there. Edmund realized his grandfather was about to come home. He didn't want him to discover the body. So Edmund went outside, waited in the driveway, and when his grandfather arrived, Edmund shot him as well. At 15 years old, Edmund Kemper had murdered both of his grandparents. Afterward, he did something chillingly calm. He called his mother. He told her what he had done. She instructed him to call the police and turn himself in. He did exactly that. Edmund was arrested and evaluated by court-appointed psychiatrists. They determined he was severely mentally disturbed and sent him to a state psychiatric hospital for criminally insane offenders. But Edmund had something most people didn't expect. He was extremely intelligent. Over the years inside the hospital, Edmund studied psychology closely, not to heal, but to manipulate. He memorized psychological tests. He learned the language doctors wanted to hear. He observed how healthy patients spoke and behaved and copied them perfectly. For 6 years, Edmund played the long game. By the time he was 21, doctors believed he was rehabilitated. Against all logic, the state released him. Even worse, his juvenile record was sealed, meaning no one outside law enforcement knew he had murdered his grandparents. Edmund Kemper walked free, and with nowhere else to go, he moved back in with the woman he hated most, his mother. Part 2. Violence as Escape. Living with his mother again was everything Edmund feared, and worse. She constantly mocked him, calling him a failure. She told him no woman would ever want him. She reminded him daily that he was worthless. To Edmund, her words felt like psychological torture. He tried to build a normal life. He applied to become a California Highway Patrol officer, but he was rejected for being too tall. At 6'9" and over 300 pounds, he didn't meet the requirements. The rejection crushed him. Later he found work, but then he was hit by a car and injured his arm badly. Once again, his life stalled, and once again, his mother blamed him. In 1972, something snapped. Edmund began driving around Santa Cruz, picking up female hitchhikers. At first, it felt harmless. Conversation, company. But soon, the fantasy turned violent. He picked up 2 college students and drove them to a secluded area instead of their destination. He handcuffed them. One was locked in the trunk. The other was taken into the woods and stabbed to death. Then he returned to the car and killed the second woman. Afterward, Edmund brought their bodies back to his apartment. What he did next crossed into extreme depravity. Later, he disposed of their remains in the mountains. And instead of fear or regret, Edmund felt relief. He later admitted that killing made him feel better, especially after arguments with his mother. Murder became his release valve. Over the next several months, the pattern continued. He picked up another hitchhiker and stabbed her. Another was shot and buried, her head placed in his mother's garden. Later, 2 more college students were shot and brought back to his mother's house while she was away. Each time, the violence escalated. Each time, the connection to his mother grew clearer. Edmund wasn't killing randomly. He was killing substitutes. Women who symbolized the rage he couldn't release on the real source of his pain. Part 3. The Final Target. One night in 1973, Edmund was at his mother's house when she came home drunk from a party. She went to her room, laid down, and began reading. Edmund entered her room briefly. She made a sarcastic comment, dismissive, cruel, familiar. That moment crystallized everything. Edmund later said he finally understood that his mother was the root of his violence, that as long as she lived, he would continue killing others in her place. He waited until she fell asleep. Then he returned with a hammer. He struck her while she slept, killing her. Afterward, Edmund decapitated her. He placed her head on a shelf in his room and spent time speaking to it, saying everything he had wanted to say when she was alive. He even threw darts at it. This wasn't rage anymore. It was ritual. Afterward, Edmund invited one of his mother's friends over for dinner. When she arrived, he strangled her to death. Then he took her car and began driving east, leaving California behind. But something strange happened. As he drove, Edmund noticed the urge to kill was gone. For the first time in years, his mind felt quiet, and that terrified him. He realized that killing his mother had ended the compulsion, and with that realization came guilt. Edmund pulled over, found a payphone, and called the police. He confessed. He calmly told them he was responsible for multiple murders, 10 in total. Edmund Kemper was arrested, tried, and convicted of 8 murders. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he remains today. Edmund Kemper didn't kill because he was angry. He killed because he learned to turn hatred inward and then outward. And in the end, the person he blamed for everything was the last one he killed.